It's Micah McCaw,
It's Jordan McCaw,
and we're the two hosts of
the McCaw Podcast Universe.
the only podcast to
That
exist
exists.
to prove people wrong when
They say sequels are never better than the originals.
And today we are jumping into a brand new series. It's a trilogy of films, and this is like the first time we've even gone into this genre before on this podcast.
What is the series called?
The series is called the Before Trilogy.
Okay.
Today we're covering Before Sunrise. Next week it's Before Sunset, and the week after that Before Midnight.
Okay.
And these movies are about as interesting as movies get.
Yeah.
And these are romance movies.
Mm-hmm.
So last week we talked about Bane. This week we're talking about a date.
This movie is the quintessential slice of life movie.
Mm-hmm.
It is quite the sliver of it.
Yes. This is this beautiful movie that captures a feeling. More than most movies. It's all about a feeling, and it doesn't. It's so good.
Mm-hmm.
What is your first experience with this movie?
I can't remember. I saw this a couple of years ago for the first time. It was before we were married.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I watched it because I think you told me about it and you were surprised I'd never seen it. I'd never even heard of it. And it probably was around the time I saw Boyhood, if I'm thinking about it.
That makes sense.
And then I watched it and I loved it. And this is the only one I've seen of the trilogy.
Yeah. So this is a movie. It doesn't have like big box office. None of the movies do. Jokingly.
Do his movies often?
No.
Okay.
No, they usually do well.
Yeah.
But not like explode. I mean, School of Rock did really well.
I will never remember that he did that movie.
Yeah. And by the way, it's Richard Linklater is the director. That's who we're talking about. And also, I think Boyhood did really well. I mean, it did. Yeah. Oscar nominations and stuff like that. So, and one or two wins, I think.
He really is interested in the human experience. I mean, no one can capture Jack Black the way he did. But honestly, he is just really attuned, I think, to what makes people human. Mm-hmm. He's just really, I think it is so hard to make a slice of life movie. It is so hard. Every time I watch one, I'm like, oh, I would love to write something like this one day. And it's just like, I don't think I could.
Yeah.
But it's just like Greta Gerwig's really good at it too.
Yeah.
And it's so impressive to me.
Well, what's kind of interesting is I didn't realize this till now, but we actually went from a filmmaker who's obsessed with time, Christopher Nolan, and we're now
another one who is.
He's the blockbuster.
Yeah. And
Richard Linklater is the indie guy.
Yeah.
But
we totally planned that.
Yeah, we did. So this series, I had always seen it on like top 250 movies. Yeah. And so I eventually, I was like, okay, let me see it. I got it from the library, I think. And I watched the first movie and I just loved it. Mm-hmm. And then I think later that week I watched the second one and I liked it even more. Mm-hmm. And then I think it took a little while, but I got a hold of the last one and I loved it. Yeah. Like they're all so good. And if you aren't aware, we'll talk about this more as we go along in the series, but there are 9 years in between each movie.
Yeah.
And when they finished this movie, there was no intention of them making a sequel of any kind. It was like, which makes sense. It's self-contained. The way it ends, it makes sense that that's it. I'm
hoping you get some quotes from Linklater for the second movie about why he wanted to make another one.
I already know a little bit, but I don't want to talk about it on this episode. Yeah. But it is wild because they keep on making these movies, and that they joked that this is like the lowest grossing franchise of all time because it doesn't really make any money.
Yeah.
But they make enough to make another one. But let's talk a little bit about who is involved in this. We have Richard Linklater as the director. So I think each episode I'll kind of walk through what he's done up to the movie we're covering.
Okay.
So the first movie he makes, he does it. So he's from Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
And he is one of like the indie pillars
So
of
is he friends
American
with Wes
filmography.
Anderson?
Probably, actually, because he's Austin too, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't remember where in Texas, but it's Texas.
Yeah.
I know it's a big state, but
that would make a lot of sense.
they seem to be around the same age.
And they have, for as different as their movies are, they do share a lot in common.
Yeah.
So Linklater makes an 16 millimeter, I believe, movie, and it's on YouTube. I was going to try and watch it before, I just didn't have time. But it's called It's Impossible to Learn to Plow by Reading Books, and it's a very slice of life.
Yeah.
I think he is the star of it. Just
Interesting.
Walking around. He also wrote Slacker and directed that. And then the next movie he makes is Dazed and Confused.
Mm-hmm.
So Dazed and Confused is his third movie, which we watched recently for the first time. And that is like one of the great American movies.
Yeah, when we watched that, my expectations, having known, the only thing I knew about the movie was Matthew McConaughey saying, all right, all right, all right.
Yeah.
That's all I knew. And I thought it was going to be kind of like a Bill and Ted's type of movie, like really just dumb. And I don't mean dumb in a bad way.
Yeah.
I hope you know what I mean. I also haven't seen that movie, but that's what I thought it was going to be. Mm-hmm. No, just very much slice of life and nostalgic, like hardcore.
And that movie too is like it takes place over like a day-ish. Which again
that's the best, to choose just a moment in a person's life.
Yeah, and that is what he is like absolutely brilliant at. He just takes like a time period and explores it in someone's life. And so he does that movie. That is your birth of Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah.
Without Dazed and Confused, we don't have Matthew. So
he's also got a young Ben Affleck in that movie.
Young Ben Affleck?
I think he'd still be able to do stuff without it.
Without that movie? Yeah.
I don't know though. Yeah, I'm not a Ben Affleck expert, but
what is wild is I don't know if you remember, but when Matthew McConaughey won his Oscar for Dallas Buyers Club, he grabs his Oscar, and the first thing he said when he got it is he said, all right, all right, all right.
Oh yeah, he did say that.
Which is great, because it's like an ode to that.
Yeah, that's cool. He has like the worst hair in that movie, and he wears salmon-colored pants with cowboy boots. It's kind of wild.
In which movie?
Dazed and Confused.
Oh, okay. I was like, I think Dallas Buyers Club, he's wearing jeans.
He's just got such a vibe going on in that movie.
Yeah. It makes sense that other directors would see his performance in that movie and be like, oh, this guy has got something.
It's great. It's
like,
so good. Everyone's so good. Even the kids.
It's such a movie star, though, already.
I will always be so impressed when you can get such good performances out of kids.
That's true.
Especially the like 14-year-old guy. When he's really good. So good at playing the character that he was playing.
Yeah.
You'd have to see it to know what I'm talking about. But yeah.
If you enjoy these movies, I think it would be pretty weird if you didn't enjoy Dazed and Confused.
Sure. Yeah.
That would be maybe you're not a Linklater person, but I'd be sort of surprised if anyone doesn't like Before Sunrise or Sunset.
Yeah.
I don't know. They're so good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he makes that, and then his fourth movie is Before Sunrise. So this is his fourth movie. I mean, that's
how young was he when he made this movie?
Let me see.
This movie came out in 1995.
1995, and
he was born in 1960.
Okay.
So 35.
34 probably when they're filming it.
Okay.
Wow.
Just curious.
Okay. But he founded the Austin Film Society, and then he started to get a cult following after he made Slacker, his second movie.
What is Slacker?
It's just about it's
about
him,
slackers.
Just like it's another like slice of life kind of movie.
Okay.
And he made that movie for $23,000.
Wow.
And so that kind of gives him the cachet to do Dazed and Confused, and then he goes on to do Before Sunrise. So now this movie is written by Richard Linklater and Kim Kryzan, who acted in Slacker and Dazed and Confused.
Who is she in Dazed and Confused?
I can't remember.
Okay, wait. Oh, she's a teacher. Miss
Okay.
Stroud.
She's the teacher?
A teacher.
I think there's only one female teacher in the movie.
Yeah,
so
that
it's probably
history
her.
teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she acted in
Cool.
those, and then she wrote this,
Mm-hmm.
and then she gets a story of credit in Before Sunset.
Okay.
But other than that, she doesn't really have much of a career in show business.
Mm-hmm.
But Linklater thought it was important when he was coming up with this idea that he had a female, a woman writing, whatever.
Yeah.
Because he didn't want it to be just like a male. It
Yeah,
can't be a male-dominated movie. Otherwise, you lose like
Half
everything.
of the movie.
Yeah. The music is by Fred Frith, and I didn't know a single thing that he
Okay.
did. The cinematography is by Lee Daniel, who is a Linklater guy and has done most of Linklater's movies. The movie comes out January 27th, 1995. It has a $2.5 million budget, and domestically it makes $5.2 million, and worldwide it makes $417 million. So,
Whoa, what?
I'm sorry, 417,000.
Okay.
So it basically makes little under $6 million.
It makes a lot of money back based on the budget.
Yeah. I mean, if you do movies with that low of budgets, then you can pull that off. It took him 9 months to cast Ethan Hawke and Delpy.
Really?
Because he wanted to make sure that it was right.
Yeah. But, okay. Did you see any other possibilities that you believed weren't just dumb trivia?
I never really pay attention to those.
Okay,
So
I would be curious.
I don't think that it was even listed, really.
Okay.
But I don't really like those usually because it just feels like someone's
like
making
this,
it up.
I would be interested.
Yeah. But it was very interesting because Ethan Hawke, who we know before this did Dead Poets Society, he was when he was in, I don't know who directed Dead Poets off the top of my head.
You want me to look it up?
No.
Okay.
But he was basically told, like, write journals as this character, be this character, contribute to the dialogue, and the director encouraged all the actors to do that. So one of his first major roles, he was kind of writing, you know? And so when he went on to do other movies, he was kind of confused that, like, oh, you don't do that. That's, like, uncommon.
You just show up and say your lines.
Yeah, and most actors are a little more like... So Linklater also, when he's trying to cast, he's telling actors, like, this will be very collaborative. You will be writing a lot of your stuff. And that's scaring a lot of actors away.
Yeah.
But he comes to Ethan Hawke, and Ethan Hawke's like, absolutely. Yeah. Like, I want this.
Yeah, he sounds perfect for it.
And so Hawke and Delpy have uncredited writing in this movie.
Cool.
Because they would spend time in a hotel, the three of them, and they would just, like, write a scene. And my understanding of the script of this movie is it was very loose. And it would be the kind of thing where it would say, like, they go to the coffee shop and they experience an intimate moment. And then it's like, okay, this week we're shooting that scene. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about in that scene.
That's very cool.
So it's a lot. And we'll see as we go that the movies become more and more personal. And
I bet.
Hawke and Delpy, like, they have writing credits in the next two movies.
Okay.
And they contribute even more than this one.
Okay.
Which they contribute a lot to. So, do you want to know about the inspiration of this movie?
Yes.
Richard Linklater was just...
Did he have this experience?
He was out in Philadelphia. And
so not Vienna, not exciting.
No. And he went to a toy shop, and he was just, like, hanging out at a toy shop, I guess.
Well, that's suspicious. I'm sure there was a reason, but yeah.
And he was, he met this woman, and he, like, left the toy shop, but they kind of had a little bit of a connection. And then he thought, you know what the heck? And he asked her when she got off, and it was, like, 10 or something like that. And then they walked around Philadelphia, like, all night long and just talked.
And, like, that's the only moment he had with this woman?
That's the only moment he had with this woman.
Wow.
And then I'll leave a little... There's
mystery?
More to the story that we're going to find out later.
Shut it.
But yeah, so...
Wow.
Because that's pretty much all he knew. And then in 2010, he gets a letter and learns more about the situation.
Is he a dad?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, it's well, I'll just tell you, because
Okay.
it sounds like you're thinking it's very positive. So he got a letter, and he was told that the woman died in a motorcycle accident.
Oh, like 10 years later?
I don't know when.
Oh, I thought you said that. Sorry.
But in 2010, he got this letter.
Okay.
And it was like, he got the letter, and the letter was kind of like, hey, and by then they would have made the second movie.
Wow.
So he got this letter, and the person's like, hey, I might be stepping out of bounds here, but I've kind of put together by your movies and like knowing her name was Amy, like Amy, that this might have been you, and this might have been this experience you've talked about. So I just thought you should know.
Wow, that's really sad.
It is. But yeah, so that's certainly interesting.
I wonder how that influenced the third movie.
Who knows?
Not
You haven't
me.
seen it. And part of the reason why they put it in a foreign country, because when you're traveling, you're much more open to experiences outside your usual realm.
Mm-hmm.
After much discussion, they wrote the screenplay in 11 days. Delpy told Creative Screenwriting, quote, Ethan and I basically rewrote all of it. There was an original screenplay, but it wasn't very romantic, believe it or not. It was just a lot of talking rather than romance. Richard hired us because he knew we were writing, and he wanted us to bring that romance to the film. We brought those romantic ideas, and that's how I wrote something that actually got made without really getting credit for it. But if I had written before Sunrise and been credited, then I doubt it would have been financed. And I think, oh yes. So this, you'll love this, Jordan. The movie takes place on June 16th, and this is the same date that James Joyce's novel Ulysses takes place, which follows Leopold Bloom around Dublin for one day.
Wow.
And June 16th is celebrated as Bloom's Day.
Wow.
So there's a little meta stuff there. And Linklater left out subtitles in the opening sequence with the arguing Germans.
Yeah.
The woman is reading in his newspaper, or the man is reading in his newspaper how 70,000 women are addicted to alcohol. The script translated the squabble as follows. You're one of them, he says to his wife. She volleys back saying, he's the alcoholic. I have a reason to do it. I'm married to you, he retorts. So that's the notes I got on the movie.
Okay.
Kind of fun learning what the Germans are arguing about, because you don't know.
Yeah.
Hit me with those actors.
So Julie Delpy plays Celine. She started acting in 1978 as her first credit. Oh, well, but it seems like she really gets going in 1985. I haven't seen her I haven't really looked.
She's a French actress.
Yeah, she's in a lot of stuff though. She's not just a French actress. Like to do French movies. She's broken out in a lot of other stuff. That being said, though, early on in her career, like when this movie got made, I don't know where she was at. So it's like been 10 years since she's been acting, but I don't know how big of a breakout she was yet at that point, is what I'm saying. But so she's also in the other two movies that are going to come out. She's also in Broken Flowers, The Hawke, Guilty Hearts, The Countess. She's in Avengers: Age of Ultron.
What?
She's Madame B. Who's that?
I have no idea. Never even heard of the name.
So, they even got her. Yeah. And then Ethan Hawke, his character name is Jesse. Oops. He is in Training Day. He's also in Boyhood that we had mentioned. Oh, yeah. He's in that movie Tesla that I wanted to see that came out last year.
Oh, yeah. I think that's on Hulu.
We should watch that. It looked very interesting.
It did. Looks like it's either a huge home run or an absolute strikeout.
Yeah.
And sometimes...
And I'm willing to take the chance.
Yeah, me too.
He's in, famously The Purge.
Yeah.
And Sinister. He's in Sinister.
And First Reformed.
We
must not forget about that
movie.
movie.
Which was such a good movie, people. Watch that movie.
Jordan went into a daze. She looked out the window and her eyes went dead.
But yeah, he is very successful. He's been in very incredibly indie things like what we're talking about today to very popular things. Love that he has done quite a bit of horror in his career. Very cool. And he also, to blow anyone's minds, because I just think it's fun, was with Uma Thurman for a time I can't remember if they were married or not.
I think they were.
Okay. And their daughter has since kind of had her breakout. She is in Stranger Things season 3.
Yep.
And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah, Robin Hawke, I
Robin
think.
Hawke. Yeah,
her name.
that's her first name. Yeah.
Um,
Just fun.
Or no, Maya. Is it Maya?
It's Maya.
It's Maya
Yeah.
Hawke. I think her name in Stranger Things is Robin.
Oh, okay.
I think. But
Okay.
I'm not sure. She's great.
She's so good.
She's got
and she looks a lot
of
like her
career ahead of
mom.
her. Yeah. And another thing I want to say about Ethan Hawke, though, is I love Ethan Hawke. I think he always brings it. But what's cool about him is if you scroll through and look at his career, he is not afraid to risk. And it feels like every time he takes a role, it is like a risky role. He is very much an artist. He is not in this to make a paycheck. He wants to push things. And I think this movie is a big testament to that.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess
It's pretty early in his career, but yeah. Definitely.
If you star in Dead Poets Society and Robin Williams is telling you to seize the day as an actor for probably, 20, 30 takes, you're probably going to take that to heart, even though you were acting.
Yeah. Also, we got to watch Daybreaker still, because I got to know if that's a good movie still.
Is that a vampire
That's
movie?
the vampire movie that he's in, and I just remember really enjoying it.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know if it's actually a good movie. But it's also got Willem Dafoe and Sam Neill.
Oh, it's got to be at least
crazy.
fun.
I just remember the world building being really good.
Yeah. I'm forgetting the cool sci-fi movie he's in with Uma Thurman.
Oh, Gattaca.
Gattaca.
Oh, a classic.
I mean, that's a great movie.
a classic sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
People, if you haven't seen Gattaca, what are you doing?
It's just crazy because all those movies you mentioned, the ones that I've seen, I'm like, oh yeah, I love that movie. Like all of he's one of my favorites. I'm always so excited when he's in it. I'd love to see him in Marvel. I don't know who he could play, but he'd be great.
He'd be so good.
He'd be awesome.
Oh, he's so good.
So should we jump in?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the movie begins, and we are on a train headed toward Vienna. And there is this German couple that we've kind of already discussed, but they're arguing very loudly.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the idea of this movie starting with an arguing couple.
Mm-hmm.
And this causes Celine to move.
Yeah.
So if not for the German couple arguing, she would never have moved.
Yeah.
Which kind of plays into this whole idea that this is just like a coincidental moment that just seemed to happen.
Later on in the movie, when they're in the coffee shop, she had mentioned almost wanting an excuse to move.
That's true.
Because she saw a cute boy.
That's true. So she goes and she sits on the train right next to Ethan Hawke's character, Jesse.
Across from him,
yeah.
A big difference, Micah.
And they begin to speak a little bit.
Uh-huh.
And then it causes her to kind of join him because they go to like the dining car.
Yeah.
And what follows is what will be very difficult to talk about. And you're looking at me so intensely.
I am.
And I need you to latch on to some stuff and jump into some stuff.
You're floundering.
I'm floundering a bit.
Well, the first thing they're talking about is if she knows what the arguing couple are talking about.
Yeah.
She doesn't, because she doesn't speak German very well. But he does invite her to go to the lounge car, and while there, they just start talking about. It seems like they are not people who can do small talk. And it's just kind of immediately they have a connection, and they're talking about very deep things about life. And you do hear that Ethan is 23. I'm just assuming that she's around the same age, although I don't know if it's said. She could be a little bit younger. She's still in school.
She is 23.
She is 23 as well.
Yeah, she says she's 23.
Okay. So she is going back to Paris. She was visiting her grandmother in Budapest.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going back to school. He is, at this point in the story, just on holiday, a long solo holiday in Europe.
Yeah.
And he's going to Vienna because he's flying out of Vienna tomorrow.
Yeah.
But in the lounge car, I mean, I can't remember exactly like the first thing they talk about, but they talk about like death. She talks about having parents who are so supportive but are very practical, and that's been a struggle with her in her life where, she says that she wants to be an artist or a writer, and her parents are saying, oh, you can be a journalist, you can be a veterinarian, you can be a newscaster, not just a whimsical artistic thing. And he's talking about, the first time he really understood death. These are just what I remember that jumped out to me. But he believes that he saw the ghost of his great grandmother in like a garden, like in water, pretty much through a stream of water, and his parents telling him like, no, when people die, they're just gone. But it's like, but I believe what I saw. Mm-hmm. And it's a little bit of an introduction into these characters. For me, it's like not quite sure like if I figured like both of them out yet.
Yeah.
But it ends with the train stops in Vienna. He's getting off. He leaves. He comes back a second later and says, okay, this is crazy.
Yeah.
But hear me out.
Hey, yeah.
And the way he presents it, his
so acting,
real.
He genuinely looks embarrassed.
He does. But it is like, if I don't do this, I will regret it for the rest of my life. And I think you will too.
He basically says, consider it a favor to whoever your future husband is, so that you can know in your brain
and your heart what this
like,
is like.
At least I gave that a shot, so I'll never wonder what if.
Yes. And oh my gosh, it's like this is fulfilling a lot of people's like fantasies,
Yes.
And like, I mean, he's just saying things that a lot of people have felt in their life. And a lot of what they talk about is a lot of what I will speak for myself have personally felt or thought at some point, like when I was 23.
Uh-huh.
So
let me just say, so we're 27. So we're like in between the age they're in this movie and the age they will be in the next movie. I just want to say that because I think it's important that when I first watched this movie, like all their conversations, I was just like, yes, this is like Fight Club. It's blowing my mind, and I'm agreeing with everything they're saying, and I'm thinking, I mean, to an extent, but I'm like, oh yeah, I get that. Oh, that's really interesting and stuff. And I will say one little worry I had, not a big one, but I thought maybe I'll watch this movie and just kind of roll my eyes at the conversations because it's a bunch of young, naive kids talking. And sometimes there are movies that are, when you see them, especially just like right out of high school and you're in college or in that age, there's a lot of movies that I saw then that I was like, this is it, guys. Like this movie, they just say it, or they have this conversation, or they think this about death. But then I watch it now and I'm like, oh, this movie like doesn't get it.
No, I think that
this is an immature movie. But this movie, the words I would use are, it's like a naive maturity that they have. Yeah,
I think they're in such a unique moment in their lives. Being 23, she is still a student, but he hasn't talked about school, so he's not a student. He is like an adult now. I mean, she is too, but she also talks about how like, I think a reason why I've continued being in school is because it's just something I can expect.
Yeah.
And so it's like she has her own interesting reasons for still being a student at 23.
Yeah.
I think this movie is like, it's so earnest that, because I'm watching this again, I think the first time I watched it, I must have been around 23 the first time I watched this movie. Yeah. And I'm the same as you. All of it was just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. They're like, it feels like speaking my language in some ways about how I feel about life. Now it is a little cringy, but personally it's a little cringy.
Yeah.
Because I have got a little bit older, hopefully a little bit wiser. And hearing some things, it's like, oh, in a couple of years, you'll figure that out.
Yeah.
But you think you're so sure about it right now. And that's the beautiful thing of it. This is like a time capsule.
Exactly.
Of that age.
Yeah. And I was, so to kind of finish my thought though, I did not find it really cringy at all. And I didn't find it, I found it a lot less relatable, but it felt nostalgic now.
Yeah.
Like sometimes a movie that has those statements, you go back and you watch it and you're like, ugh, I used to think that, or like totally. I thought this was cool. But I watch this and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that.
Well, you know what's so good?
I remember being that kid.
Yeah, and what's so good about this movie too is it's not full of one-liners. To capture a feeling. It's not like, and I like the book, and I do think it's a good movie, but it's not like Perks of Being a Wallflower when he's talking about feeling infinite. Like that, it's not.
Right.
It's much more human. Well, not human. It's just much more like down to earth, and I would just even say generally relatable than that. And I think that's just different filmmakers. I don't even think that one's like. I'm not saying Perks of Being a Wallflower is bad because it's not.
No.
And it also is capturing a different age as well.
Totally. I do think that what benefits this movie a lot, though, is the fact that there's 4 writers.
Yeah.
And there's all these different perspectives because especially Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy being able to write a lot of what they say. It's just so earnest, and it doesn't feel like there is one. It doesn't feel like Aaron Sorkin's behind the screenplay navigating it to get to a certain point.
No.
Which is not a bad thing, but this movie shouldn't be that.
No, a lot of it, there is no point. And that's,
yeah.
I mean, that's being 23. You know, that's the beautiful part that they really capture in this movie. And so seeing this movie a second time around, older.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing it as a woman, you know, through my experience. What I see in Ethan Hawke's character is he's pretty insecure and has got kind of a big ego.
Mm-hmm.
But what's just such well written about his character is he is deflecting and is in defense most of the time because he just had his heart broken.
Yeah.
That's like the beautiful part of it.
The pinball scene really.
Oh, it's like
home.
This explains so much of how you'd been acting, and I don't even think up until that point it's been like he's such a bad guy. He's so annoying, like such a typical dude. No, not at all. Because he's also being very honest with her in other ways because he has a connection for sure.
But there is a bit of like when he's asking questions, he's very like sure of himself.
Definitely.
But also that's a facade, like you're saying.
Yeah.
Like he's putting up a wall that says like I'm sure of myself about this thought, but he really isn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. So when he's asking her to spend the night with him, just hanging out in Vienna, you know, he is telling her all the things that we said, like you'll know what this is if you get off on the train with me. This feeling, this moment, it doesn't have to end. We can just see what happens, and then we can both go on with our lives, like, you know, having this gift for the rest of our lives.
Think of it like time travel, he says.
Yeah.
But this is a moment we get to time travel back to, and we're getting to live it instead of not live this moment.
It's so great. And she's like pretty immediately, yeah, okay.
Let's do it.
Let's do this. So... And I love too where he's like, if you think like I could be a psychopath, or if you think like things get weird, you just get on the next train.
You just get on the next train.
You have such an easy out.
Yeah.
I still probably wouldn't get off the train because I'm afraid of everybody. But that's not the kind of movie we're watching. So they get off the train and they're just in Vienna. Which
which is in what country?
Austria.
It's in Austria.
So,
I always forget.
It's just so... The setting is so interesting. I feel like it's like, I mean, I don't know if Richard Linklater has a personal connection to that city, but it in a way feels like a love letter to it in some ways.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's locations.
So romantic.
It's just, it's so romantic. And I do like that they didn't go to Paris, which is, you know, a famously romantic city.
Or even like Venice or something.
And if he did, that would be totally fine.
Yeah.
But to choose Vienna, great. Just an interesting, great choice.
Yeah. And, you know, I think this is a perfect time to plug our Patreon, and I'll tell you why. Jordan and I were watching this, and we said, oh my gosh, we have to go out of the country again. But since we have a house, you know, it's harder to save more money. So we are going to need to bump up our Patreon numbers so that we can go to Europe again.
So please and thank you.
Go to patreon.com/MICAHMCCAW. Get bonus episodes.
Unfortunately,
now we'll go back to the movie.
We're not 23 anymore and own a house now and can't be as impulsive as these characters.
But it was cool because on our honeymoon, we were 23. So there is this kind of like, there's a relatability to this movie that feels very personal. And, you know, we had never met before. We just
got married and went on a honeymoon to Italy.
Yeah. But so... Then they get off the train, and the first thing they do is they're kind of like, okay, so what are we going to do? And they acknowledge, this is weird, right? This is really awkward.
It's a little awkward. Well, one of the first things she says is, what's your name?
Yeah, and he says it's it's James, but people call me Jesse, and she's like, Jesse James, are you kidding me? And then she says her name's Celine. And they come across a couple of Austrians, and they are kind of giving them a hard time.
Because they don't speak the language, and it's like, oh, okay, well, of course, we're just going to speak English because that's what you're expecting, right?
Yeah. And they plug their play, which is Bring Me the Horns of Wilmington's Cow. And it's just funny. It's like they're already treated like a couple right off the bat.
Well, she says that they're on their honeymoon to them.
And they think like, oh, no, you're not.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
So, like everyone can tell this is a new romance.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they get on the trolley and they ask each other questions. And it's funny because, so think about like a superhero. A superhero is like, there's like this power fantasy, like if you could do all these things, all this power and stuff like that. And a lot of movies have that where you watch them and you're like, man, if only I could do that thing. This movie is that, but it's for a relationship or a time period.
Yeah.
Because in this relationship, they get on this trolley. First of all, it's like a 5 or 6 minute shot and the camera is just sitting there with them.
And it's a pretty tight shot, which means, the relationship's becoming a tiny bit physical.
Yeah.
At this point.
And Jesse says, okay, let's do something here. We may never see each other again, so let's say this. Let's ask each other questions, and you have to answer them completely honestly, which is this huge, like, fantasy. Like, if you met someone that you thought was so, like, maybe you were very attracted to, or even just, like, you meet a new person, and sometimes you instantly have, like...
a connection.
Oh, my gosh, like... I could be best friends with this guy. Like, this guy's cool. Yeah. I want to be best friends. And it would be cool if you could just say, hey, let's ask each other questions. 10 questions. And you have to be completely honest.
Well, like the scene in Step Brothers when they realize that they're best friends.
Exactly like that. But there is like kind of a fantasy element to this movie that's very gratifying.
Oh, yeah. It's so satisfying to watch.
Satisfying. Gratifying is that a weird word to use?
No, I think that's appropriate. That's fine. So his first question for her is, what's your first sexual experience? She answers some boy she went to school with.
Like sexual feelings.
Oh, sexual feeling. Not, did I say sexual encounter?
You said interaction.
Okay, yeah. Feelings.
Yeah.
So a boy from school, he was on the swim team. He liked her, but her friend liked him. It was kind of a dramatic little thing. Mm-hmm. And then she asked him a question, and I don't think it was specifically that one. I forget what the question was, but all he says is yes.
Yeah, and then he goes, "You never said we never said we had to explain
Which is it feels like such a guy who thinks he's in control of the conversation. Because she is like, no, it doesn't work that way. And of course,
she's like, come on.
He's arguing with her, and she is pretty much like, this is full honesty. I'm not going to give a 5-minute answer, and you just give 1 second. That's not how this works. So there's give and take.
I think there's an element of he's being cheeky and he's flirting in that way.
Absolutely.
But it is a very interesting dynamic.
It is. So, He talks about his first sexual feelings as well, and then I think they get off the trolley.
They get off the trolley and they go to a record store. And oh my gosh, the beauty in this scene.
Yeah.
They're looking at records and they're still kind of getting to know each other. They go into a listening booth, and I just cannot believe the acting of these two actors.
And that's when, again, they're in a smaller space, so they're getting even a little bit more physical. Basically, like, can I touch her arm or like?
I always think they're gonna kiss in that scene because it really looks like they're giving each other that look of like
who's gonna make the first move.
Yeah, and they're looking around the room, and it's a really long shot. It's not uncomfortable. It's just like it's exciting.
It's just, again, capturing an emotion.
Very cathartic.
So sweet.
Yeah,
and very nostalgic. Very much so. Whether or not you've even had that.
Well, because we stopped kissing like 4 years ago. Our last kiss was when we got married, right?
Sure.
Just kidding. We kiss all the time.
Okay.
And then they go to a graveyard.
Mm.
And they're talking about death and stuff. And I think, they talk about death and a lot of philosophical and psychological things throughout the movie.
And I think a lot of it comes from her.
Yeah,
I think
totally.
part of it is like that is her as a character to be even. I think it's like she is such a curious mind when I think his character has the facade of I have it figured out.
Totally.
She is figuring it out and is honest about it. And that's like the beautiful blend of these characters for one. I think also, like she is a student, so she has a very analytical mind as well.
Yeah.
And she's always willing to learn things. So in this graveyard, she was here as a child, and this is the graveyard of no names because it's bodies that have washed up on the shore. And there's a specific grave that she remembers as a child, like this was the one that I remember. The girl's name was Elizabeth. She died when she was 13. And it's weird that I'm now 10 years old. Like at the time I was 13 when I saw this.
And now it's 10 years later.
And now it's 10 years later. Kind of funny. And then that's kind of like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so they're talking about all these deep issues and deep things. And what I find is that for one, it's like that's a movie. They can't just, I feel like they couldn't just be like, hey, what's your favorite color? Blue. That would just be such a boring movie. You got to get into some stuff. But again, I think it's also in that fantasy of like, if you did have one night with this random person and you were being honest with each other, maybe you would just bare your soul like that. Mm-hmm. Maybe you would just, let's talk about death. What do you think about it? Because I'm probably not going to see you ever again. Let's just have these intense conversations instead of this surface level stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's really cool.
So another thing, so they talk about death a lot. They also talk about love a lot.
Yes.
And he a lot talks about how he's not sure if he believes in love. That was the first question she asked him. Have you ever been in love? And that's when he said just yes. But, then he follows it up with, have I told someone I love her?
Uh-huh.
Yes. Is it like that love where it's like, I'll do anything for her, I'll die for her? It's this big, unfailing thing? I don't think so. And then like later on, he says stuff like that too. And then you find out his parents hated each other.
Yeah.
And they stayed together for as long as they could for the well-being of him and his sister. So it's like, okay, of course he might not believe in love at 23.
Yep.
And what's so beautiful too is, I can't remember if that's before, I think that's after they kiss in the Ferris wheel. So they're up in the Ferris wheel. It's like, could it get more romantic up there?
No.
Don't think so. So they seize the opportunity to kiss. And then he says this thing afterward about his parents, and she's just like, "Oh yeah, you don't believe in love," talking about the sunset. She gives him a hard time. So perfect, and it's like she is totally calling him out.
Yeah,
and it's like either he is just such a fake guy trying to just get this girl, or he really believes in love.
Yeah,
I would like to believe he believes in love. He's just afraid of it.
Yeah,
and I think that's the case.
Oh, it is.
Yeah,
it totally is. And I like that he. And we'll get more into this in the next two movies, so I don't want to totally spoil it or anything. But it is a feeling that I definitely could relate to some extent, not nearly to the intensity. But it is like, well, I don't know, like what is love, what is marriage? Like it's good for some people, and that is true. Some people it's not good for, but this kind of wishy-washy thing where it's like, well, I'm just being more open than other people, but really. Like, I think it is a lot of like, well, I just am scared of it, or I don't understand it at all.
Afraid of commitment.
Yeah.
All this stuff. And around that same scene, she talks about her parents too, which I really liked. And as well, she's talking about how her dad's some like big shot architect that's traveled the world. But prior to that, her parents grew up being rebels, rebelling against any kind of war, fighting for peace, rebelling against their strict Catholic upbringing. And then they had me, and they became strict. And they became structured when they grew up fighting structure.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting because she's trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
Like, what is she supposed to be doing? And a big thing she says is, I don't know what we're fighting for.
Yeah.
To be rebellious about anything. Like, it feels like there's nothing to be fighting for anymore or against.
Yeah.
Which I just thought was really interesting.
Totally. And so they talk about that. Okay. Then we have the palm reader.
Yeah.
So they're at a dinner, and this palm reader comes by, and she reads Celine's palm. and says, you're a strong woman. You have a ways to go, but you're getting there, all this other stuff. And then
she knows that they had just met.
Yes. Yeah. She knows they just met and all that stuff. And Celine's like, wow, that's pretty cool. And then she reads Jesse's hand, like briefly, and she's like, you're learning, and just walks away and talks about how we're all stardust when the earth was born. And you can tell
he was offended by it.
And again the acting.
Yeah.
She's like, you can tell that she's like, oh, that felt really nice. And he's just like, oh, can you believe that BS? Like, who has the audacity to come over here, tell you all the things you want to hear, and then she says, I'm learning. That's what she says to me. And so then you get this whole thing where, earlier in the movie, he's talked about souls and all this other stuff, but then right now he's like so closed off to the idea of,
well, someone trying to judge him and figure him out, who doesn't know him and doesn't have a right in his eyes.
Yeah. And I don't really buy any of the palm reading stuff either. In that scene, I'm like, nice, get it,
But his
dude.
reaction is revealing the insecurities in his life.
Totally.
And she continues to kind of make fun of him, like to just give him a hard time about it.
Yeah.
To be like giving him a hard time for being so closed off. And I think it's soon after this scene when they're walking and the guy writes a poem for them. I know I'm skipping a little bit, but it just kind of goes in with it.
Yeah.
So I'll just couple it. But there's a man that says, give me a word, I'll write a poem. If you like it, you can pay me. I'm not just going to ask for money. So they give him the word milkshake. He writes this poem.
It's a really nice poem.
That's a very nice poem. However, Jesse's response as they're walking away is...
Let me say something really quick. So I was sitting there and I was like, I like this whole idea. This is cool. And the two people in the movie, they're artist types. Jordan and I are artist types. And I'm like, that's really interesting. Sitting on the corner and giving someone a personalized poem, or in my case, a personalized song or something like that. That's interesting. I like that. And then before he said this thing, I was like, I suppose if you wanted to, you could just have like 4 or 5 different poems and you could just cycle through them.
Which is what Jesse says is he probably already has a poem written out and just plops that word in it. And so again, it's just like cynical.
But what is so funny that Celine points out is like, again, on the Ferris wheel, you were so romantic and you said, we're up in a Ferris wheel. I mean, this is when I'm supposed to kiss you and stuff like that. And he's the one who he's the catalyst to this whole thing. He's like, let's go. Let's be time travelers. Let's be romantic. And then when something romantic like this happens, he's got to be like, well, I'm a cool guy.
But I think it's because he's not in control of it. He's not orchestrating the kiss or inviting her off.
Yeah.
It's people telling him something about himself or trying to get money or trying to elicit an emotion out of him. Yeah. So it tells you a lot about how he views other people. And then it does kind of beg the question a little bit is how does he view her? At no point does he make her feel dumb at all. Or like, because I think because he has such a deep connection with her, she's like, he is willing to figure her out and let her figure him out. And I think because she is giving him such a hard time, it is like, that's good that she is fighting back against his like false cynicism.
Yeah.
It's just great.
It's, chef's kiss is this movie. Come on. So then they go to the bar, a club, and they play pinball. And this is like one of the key scenes of the whole series. Yeah. Because they start talking a little bit more, and he says, are you with anyone? Are you in a relationship? And
which when the first time I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, they could be. That's crazy.
This could just be this strange thing that they're doing. But she says, I was with someone, and then that person broke up with her, and she went to a psychiatrist. And when she was there,
someone she didn't even like broke up with her. That was her whole thing, is she hated him. She felt not hated was a strong word. I don't know if she used that word, but like he was ugly. He hated himself.
It was a bad lay, she said.
Yeah. And she's like, I felt like I was doing him a favor by going out with him. And then he
broke up with me.
Yeah.
And he said I was getting in the way of his artistic
and she
creativity.
loved him too much.
Yeah. And so she's like, oh, so she goes to this a therapist, I think. And she says to the therapist, like, I've planned how to murder this man.
No. It's a story she wrote. She wrote a story about a woman planning to murder a man.
That's right.
Yeah.
And in a way, she's just saying, like, I just wrote this and
she's working through it.
This is me working through it. And the therapist says, oh my gosh, I have to call the police and stuff like that.
You're going to kill this person.
And so, I mean, now I kind of lost my train of thought, but.
Well, she's just like, someone's telling her that she's hysterical because this breakup is so, like, it hurt her so much. And she's just like, no, I'm processing it.
Yeah.
I like to write.
Yeah.
And so then it's Jesse's turn to bring it up.
We managed to avoid this for so long.
Yeah.
And he says, I was not here just on vacation. I was visiting my girlfriend.
In Madrid.
And I could tell pretty clearly I couldn't, like, spend time alone with her. Yeah. We haven't seen each other for 6 months or something like that.
He pretty much made it sound like he spent a couple days with her and her friends to make her feel bad for how bad she was making him feel.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And he left.
That's what you got out of it? That was his intention?
Not necessarily. I think that if anything, he's saying that to make himself feel better.
Oh, okay. Because to me it sounds like he went there and then he's like, what the heck am I doing? This sucks. I spent all this money and stuff, and I'm here.
Yeah.
And I've been here for a few days, and you won't even be with me.
Yeah.
So then he bought the cheapest flight he could, which leaves out of Vienna.
Yeah.
And he was just kind of hanging out until then. I love it.
Yeah.
And I think he was a little bit better at pinball than her, because they switch quite a lot, and she doesn't last as long. So, which leads into their conversation about feminism and sex walk is what I wrote, because they're talking about, he's mentioning how there's a breed of monkeys that just, like, has sex all the time, and they don't.
There's no baggage.
There's no baggage.
There's
and
no
stuff.
claiming one person.
And she says this thing which I love. It's so funny when this movie's also very funny. Where she says, sometimes I think that feminism was invented so that men could just sleep around.
Yeah.
Which she's being facetious.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
But it is funny where she's like, woman, be free and stuff like that so we can have sex with you and then move on to the next girl.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And all of this stuff, the eternal struggle between man and woman is very interesting. And I don't feel like this conversation gets even close to, like, it's a progressive conversation, I feel like.
I mean, they're just figuring it out as they're talking about it, because she says stuff kind of throughout the movie about how, like, women don't need men, jokingly and stuff. And he eventually just kind of asks her, like, so you hate men, right? Based on how she had been talking about men throughout the movie. And she's just like, no, I don't. Like, I just am not articulating it well. And I think because she's also still trying to figure out how she feels about feminism, about herself, and about men. I think it's just it's a continuously evolving feeling that she's having, and that you figure out throughout the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And I think, is this when they go to the church after?
They've actually already been to the church.
Because I really like the church part too. So they go to, like, a cathedral, and it's just very interesting because they both are clearly not religious. They just say that kind of throughout the movie, but they are talking about, I would say both of them agree on how interesting this place attracts bad people and good people. Mm-hmm. How it attracts so many people like that. And how she finds it is beautiful.
Yeah.
He seems like he hasn't really thought about it.
Yeah.
And soon, so then I think after the belly dancer scene that you were referring to as well, they're hanging out in an alley for a little bit. And I really like what she says about, she's not religious, but if she does believe in a God, she believes that, it's not like what's within us, but God's between us. Like right now with the specific conversation they were having, I can't remember the specific conversation.
I can't either.
But she was just saying, I feel like God's right here between us.
Yeah.
And he doesn't even respond, because I feel like it was just so profound. What do you say to something like that? But it wasn't like an awkward silence.
No.
It was just like I need to think about that.
Yeah.
And then they continued walking.
There's also, he says this great line that at the time when I first saw this movie, I was like, I understand and I get, where he says, I'd rather die doing something excellent and good. This is when they're talking about.
That's with the conversation. Go ahead.
Yeah, and they're talking about marriage and stuff like that, and how like it's kind of this whole idea, like maybe we should rethink it.
And he's talking about being a dad.
Yeah, and he says, I'd rather die knowing I did something great and excellent than being like a good guy.
And what's so, and he does clarify, he's like, not that I think marriage is bad or that I think being a dad is not fulfilling or bad. I just don't know if that's for me. And then he says what you said. But then she says she had this experience with a man in his 50s where he told her that he was like 52. He was very accomplished in whatever his chosen career path was. But that was it. And he admitted that he felt like he had nothing to offer. So like he became a very accomplished person, but he had nothing to show for it. Because I think he sacrificed having a family for doing something like that. So she just...
Well, and what I wanted to say too is that he, like when I first saw the movie, I was like, I agree with him. Yeah. Like that's how I feel about my life. Yeah. I want to be a musician and I want to be known for that. And the older I get, I mean, it's still a constant struggle. Yeah. But the older I get, the more I'm like, no, I want to be a good husband. Yeah. Eventually, I'd like to be a good father. And then under those things, I'd like to be a good musician, a good podcaster as well. But I don't know. It's just...
No, I think what he says is so true. It's like...
It's that naivety again, though.
No, it is. It is.
So then there's the phone call in the restaurant. You want to talk about this a little bit?
Sure. I feel like I've been talking a lot.
Okay. I'll cover the phone call.
Okay.
So, again, I can't overstate how good their acting is.
This felt like the actors came up with this...
I'm sure they
did.
This
way of conversation.
It feels... I mean, all their dialogue feels like they're genuinely... The characters are coming up with what they're saying when they say it. But this one feels like... I wouldn't be surprised to learn if this scene was improvised, is how this scene feels. So Selena puts up a hand phone and she says... Ring, 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 I'm calling my friend. Ring, 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 ring. And then he picks it up and she's able to kind of bare her soul and
about
talk
how she feels about him.
About how she feels about him. And then he does the same thing with her pretending to be his friend. And they're basically able to say that they've pretty much fallen for each other. But as soon after, they're like, well, we shouldn't sleep together because that'll ruin the magic of this moment.
They don't say that at the park, though. Is that at a different time?
I don't know exactly what it is.
Okay, because I do like what she says about that. Yeah. Later.
Well, we can just say. Oh, now. Well, I mean, I don't know what you're talking about.
They're in the park. They'd had wine.
That's what I'm referencing.
Getting amorous, and she says that I don't think we should sleep together because it'll, like you just said, it'll ruin the magic. It will feel like just another fling, just another girl that you slept with / guy.
And since we'll have never see each other again.
Yeah, and then she says, "I'll think about you with other women, and I don't want to."
Yeah,
they do have sex, but the phone call stuff, that is like, it's like it feels like no one can write this. That's how it feels. Yeah, it's so real. Yeah, and sweet. And I think soon after that, they go to a boat dinner.
Yeah, and that's when she says, do you think we'll ever see each other again? Yes. And they talk about, like, let's be adults. This will fizzle. I'm not going to fly over there. You're not going to fly over here. I mean, they say they will, but they're like...
But we know we won't.
Yeah, and they're like, let's make it a magical night then. We still have a little bit of time. And they say
their goodbyes right there.
Yeah, because it'll be hard to do it later.
Yeah.
And then they go to a bar, and they don't have any money, really. She steals 2 glasses. And he leans to the bartender and he says, I know that this sounds crazy, but do you see that girl over there? He's like, yeah. And he goes, we have one night together and we're never going to see each other again. I have no money, but if you give me the address to this place, I will send you money. And he says, I just know, but I really will. I really will. Can you please give us a bottle of wine? And the guy is just like, okay.
And I'm just like, you rule, man. It's like, you have no idea. I mean, you do. That man has done one of the biggest acts of kindness.
And so they go and they have a wonderful night and the camera pans away. We don't see that part of it.
Yeah.
And then the next morning, they're walking around. They hear a harpsichord playing. They talk about something he says that I very much relate to the older I get, where he says, I think people get sick of themselves.
Yeah.
And he says, you can never, like, when I go to the movies, I'm always there with myself at the movies. When I go to a friend's house, I'm always there. And I can never get away from myself. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I don't think I related to this when I first watched this movie, but I relate to it now, where it's like, boy, it would be great to have a day off from this jabroni over here.
I relate to that as well. Yeah.
So that might be the most mature thought that or the most relatable the movie felt to me at this time in my life. The beautiful thing about these movies is, like, I almost feel like we could go, hey, in 5 years, if we're still doing the podcast, let's cover the series again, and we would talk about completely different things.
Oh yeah.
That's we would listen to our podcast and we'd be like, oh my gosh, listen to those two babies being stupid.
Mm-hmm.
So then they go to the train. Anything else you want to cover before that?
No.
So first of all, a little director greatness in the movie.
Yeah,
he shows the city in the morning, and he's showing all the spots they were at. And it's just so like...
It's like, come on, man. That's so good.
Because the night was so romantic, and to me, it felt like the romance is gone, and it feels like the city is now like regenerating, and then another romantic night is going to happen again. Mm-hmm. And it felt like his way of saying, like, they are now back in real time. Yes. To which Ethan Hawke even says, it's real time again.
Yes.
We're out of that time traveling moment.
Yeah, and oh my gosh, when they're walking to her train, they're both just, you visibly freaking out. Like, she is about to cry, you can tell. And I think he is too. And
oh, yeah.
They get to her car, cab, whatever. And it's just like, do we really have to do this?
Yeah.
And it's so stressful because the train is about to leave. It's so stressful when they just keep saying, like, it's going to leave any minute. It's going to leave any minute. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what are you going to do? Do it now, please. I'm like, there's no time to take out a piece of paper and write down your address. Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So.
No cell phone.
No cell phone, no nothing. Well, they do have phones. But so they're basically like, okay, screw it all.
I know we said we weren't going to be romantic and idyllic, but
this doesn't have to be the last time we have to see each other. I think he's like, what if I said that? And she pretty much is like, I was hoping you'd say that. And he's like, how come
you say it earlier?
She's like, I didn't want you to, I was afraid that you didn't feel the same way, which she does kind of throughout the night about things. So they're trying to scramble to figure this out. And, he's like, okay, in 5 years. And she's like, 5 years? And he's like,
she says that. And he's like, 5 years? That's way too long.
That's right. And she's like, yeah, you're right. And then he eventually settles on, they both settle on 6 months.
Yeah.
They will come back to this train station, to this specific platform, to the specific car.
Yeah.
This is where they'll meet in 6 months. He's like, okay, this is a train ride for you. This is a plane ride for me. So we need to be here. Like, this is a big commitment to do that. Yeah.
And she says, I'll be there. And he says, I'll be there.
And he says, no writing, no calling. And they're both like, yeah, because we hate that stuff. Like, it's not good enough. We need to be together. So that's the plan. She gets on the train. He is going on the bus to get to the airport. There is a moment when she gets on the train. As a movie watcher, you're conditioned to think he is running on the train to be with her and go to Paris with her and never go back home.
And knowing that this movie was never intended to be a trilogy.
Exactly.
You're like, oh, maybe they're going to turn around. I mean, probably if you're familiar with his other 3 movies, you're probably not thinking that. If you're a Linklater fan at the time, because he likes to capture a moment. Yeah. And this movie is a moment.
And it would definitely weaken the movie if that happened. If it was a cookie cutter, like, wrap the bow kind of thing.
And we probably wouldn't get 2 amazing masterpieces after it.
It's like, I think there is a sizable population of movie watchers who need close-ended stories. Yeah. But, like, just if you're that person who needs the closure, try to be okay with this kind of movie where it technically doesn't have that kind of closure you're used to in a story. It is closure.
Yeah, well, this is not the closure that maybe you want, but again, this movie is about a moment and it's about a feeling, and that moment and feeling, there is absolutely a conclusion to those two things.
Yeah, so the conclusion doesn't have to be them being together. It's the whole,
or them like breaking up.
The moment and the evening was bigger than them as characters. That's the whole point. That's why it's like beautiful and there is closure to the story.
Yeah.
That this is how it ended. So obviously from our conversation, he does not go on the train. He gets on the plane. She gets on the train. They go their separate ways. He goes back to America. She goes to Paris. And the last couple of shots, it's just enough to make you want to bawl your eyes out because it's so beautiful, the culmination of this. He is sitting on the bus, just smiling to himself. Like trying to sleep, but you know he's not going to sleep.
And she does the same.
She's trying to read her book on the train. There's no effing way she's reading that book. She's gazing out the window, thinking about all the things. And what I love too is before that, when they were listening to the harpsichord, he took a picture of her, a mental picture, where he just stared at her.
Which they ripped off in the office.
Sure.
I'm just kidding.
And that is so beautiful too. So it's like he's probably closing his eyes right now and seeing that picture.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it says, directed by Richard Linklater.
Yeah.
Or I think it says before sunrise, and then it says that. And that's the end of the movie. Now, Jordan, I'm dying to know, because right when we finish the movie, so sometimes our loyal and lovely listeners and newbies, welcome to the show. Sometimes we turn off a movie that we've watched and we'll talk about it for like 20 minutes, even though we don't have the mics on. And then sometimes we'll be like, let's not talk at all. This one, I was like, we'll talk a little bit, but don't tell me everything that you think about this movie, Jordan, because I want to get it on mic. And what I really wanted to know is, do you think they show up? And what do you think like the next movie is about? Since you
Can
have
I
not
say
seen
both?
It.
What I think?
Yes, yeah.
Two thoughts. So one, I think there's a possibility where they don't. One of them doesn't show up, or both of them don't show up because of the fizzle. Mm-hmm. Because 6 months, I know that's not that long, but for relationships, that could be a long time.
Yeah.
Where they both don't make it there. Maybe they meet someone else in those 6 months, and the rest is history in terms of that part of the story.
Yeah.
And then the next one, they find each other again somehow. I have no idea. Or in 6 months, they are there, and they're just together. And that's like, what before...
Like they've been together for 8 years, like 8.5 years.
Yes. I can see both possibilities, but I'm sure it's another possibility that I haven't even thought of.
Well, do you have one you're leaning toward? I'm curious.
No, genuinely no.
So, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to watch it again. I remember liking it more than this movie.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and I think even Roger Ebert shared that opinion.
Oh.
So, you know our tagline, we exist to prove people wrong when they say that sequels are never better than the originals. We got a good contender. We've had like a couple series in a row where the first one has not been the best one. So one thing we forgot to do, I don't know why because I kind of try to keep track of this. We forgot to rank our Dark Knight movies for our previous
2, 1, 3.
Mine is, it's different. Mine is Dark Knight number 1. Dark Knight Rises number 2, Batman Begins number 3.
I could like Batman Begins a little bit better this time for some reason.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I think I just, as we have talked about before, I think I finally understood a lot of the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
That added a lot to the characters for me.
It's like last week we did talk about how there are a lot of problems with Dark Knight Rises, but it's just too pretty of a movie, and I just like the attempt at the very least. It's a little more ambitious.
Sure, it is a big movie.
Well, I don't know if it's as ambitious as Batman Begins, but it's just a little bit better, I think.
Yeah.
But they're all so great.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Do we have anything else to cover?
No.
Well, I will plug for all of you. If you would be so kind as to go to Spotify or whatever you listen to, and listen to my new release, The First Family, which is old songs that have been remixed and have new tracks on them and sound at like 100% better than they used to sound. So please give that a listen, and please share it with some people, your friends. helps me out a lot. And boy, I hate release days. That they are so hard on my mental health. Because you just never know what's going on. And I also did a show that's on YouTube, and anyone can watch it. The First Family release concert. It's really cool. I worked really hard on it, so please check that out.
Really good.
And again, you can go to Patreon. Link is in the description, and I'll put the First Family show in the show notes as well, so you can click that and watch it. But next week we are going to cover Before Sunset. Oh yeah, and on Patreon we covered the Batman 1966 movie this month. So
you're welcome.
It's good. That movie rules, but we're not going to tell you anymore. Tell you download it by spending $3 a month. Love you guys.
See you at sunset.